What it do? It's your boy Andre Spruell, and you are tuning in to Middle of the Fence podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, whether you're listening, watching, or both. As I like to say, time is the most valuable thing on this earth because we can spend it but can't make it back. So as always, thank you for your time, and hope everyone's day is going well and your week has been a good one. Mine could be a little better. My fantasy football team has lost 4 weeks in a row, so hopefully things can change so I don't suffer the punishment for finishing in last place. And other than that, also training for a half marathon. So if you're already following me on Instagram, you've been seeing some of the journey with it. And yeah, so that's what's been going on with me personally, and hope all you guys are doing well. And again, thank you for tuning into the Middle of the Fence podcast. Today's topic is new keys, new mindset, what moving out really teaches you. And so this episode is basically about moving out and living on your own and how that looks like on both sides of the fence. And so living alone can feel like freedom or survival, depending on which side of the fence you grew up on. And for the tough terrain side of the fence, moving out is often out of necessity, tied to family dynamics, finances, or needing to stand on your own early, versus the Affluent Acres side, where moving out and living on your own is often a choice, and it's delayed usually until stability is ensured with the safety net that you just have and allows you to gradually transition. So the reason why I wanted to do this topic in the first place is because I moved out and started living on my own at the age of 22. As soon as I graduated college, I was home for 3 months, and my brother and I moved out and been living on our own ever since. And with the dual upbringing that we had, we got to experience and see firsthand what moving out and living on your own looks like, depending on where you grew up. So let's look at the first aspect of this, which is the timeline of independence. So the age and reasons people move out differ sharply across socioeconomic lines. So on the tough terrain side, many move out early due to crowded housing, financial pressure, or family responsibilities. And that sense of independence on the tough terrain side usually equates to survival and self-sufficiency. And there's often no soft launch. If you grew up on the tough terrain and you're living on your own for the first time, it's straight into bills, rent, and responsibilities. And I personally can relate to this because, like I said, I moved out when I was 22 years old and have been living on my own ever since. And I've been vocal in past episodes about the love and support that I receive from my family in general, which I'm blessed and grateful for. But even living on my own with my brother, we've had to figure it out. And that's how it was. As soon as we started living on our own, it's like, yes, freedom. We don't have to answer anybody. We don't have to sneak anyone into the house, if you want some company and things like that. But it came with a lot of responsibilities, and living on your own really does shape you and allows you to be resilient and figure out a way. And my brother and I have been able to navigate on our own. And again, despite having a loving and supportive family, we can count on one hand the amount of times where we've generally needed help to pay rent, or a car has been broken down, so we need help with that. So, we can count on one hand the amount of times that we've needed help, and that just comes from the tough terrain background of being resilient and finding a way. This is from Reynolds and Yu's 2021 article. Black and Latino young adults move out earlier but are more likely to experience housing instability within 2 years. So, very powerful piece of research right there. And let's transition to the Affluent Acres side and how the timeline of independence looks over there. So, many on the Affluent Acres side stay home into their mid-20s with their parents, and are often encouraged to save before moving on. And independence on the Affluent Acres side mostly looks like stability, emotional readiness, and a curated lifestyle. And the transition is a lot more gradual. So it's often supported by family wealth or parental assistance. And so that's just a snapshot of how different it looks when you move out and live on your own while growing up in a high crime rate neighborhood or growing up in a more suburban or affluent type of background. And this is from Fades and Horitz's 2022 research, which states almost half of adults aged 18 to 29 in the U.S. live with one or both of their parents following big rises in recent decades. So there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. So that just goes to show that, again, although we've already delved into how different it looks living on your own, depending on your socioeconomic background, kids in general are staying at home. And there's a lot of factors. We've been through a lot of major life events that we've seen over the last 20, 25 years than what most people have experienced than what more people will ever experience in their lifetimes, probably, And obviously with the rise of homes, especially in New Jersey, because of, like I mentioned before, the day job with the real estate background, and it's very expensive to live here, to say the least. But again, and it's going to be interesting to see if that number keeps growing and growing, or if the tide eventually shifts and turns into more people eventually moving out and living on their own. So when you talk about leaving the nest, for some people, it's an upgrade. For others, it's an eviction notice from reality. So let's look at the freedom versus fragility. And what I mean by that is how resources shape the emotional and mental side of living alone. So let's start with the tough terrain side. So on the tough terrain, freedom can feel heavy. Every bill, repair, or rent payment rests solely on your shoulders. Ain't that the truth? Limited safety net means mistakes have a bigger consequence. So again, because if you have more of an urban background while growing up and start living on your own, you tend to not have as much help and support in general to help you navigate through certain things, and you just have to find a way and figure it out. And the emotional toll of isolation hits harder when the community was once a safety net, which is something that you see when it comes to the tough terrain side. And on the Affluent Acres side, freedom tends to feel lighter. Failure isn't final. And emotional challenges exist, but there's a cushion. And by cushion, I mean you get family visits, care packages, and help with rent. And when I say that, obviously stuff like that happens on the tough terrain side, but is a lot more prevalent on the Affluent Acre side. And independence on the Affluent Acre side feels like discovery and not danger. And a 2022 meta-analysis published in Frontiers Psychiatry found that living alone is associated with a 42% increased risk of depression. This effect is particularly pronounced when individuals experience additional stressors, such as financial or social difficulties. So that illustrates obviously a big factor of the downside of living on your own. And there's positives and negatives with everything in life. And I wanted to highlight that because that goes across both sides of the fence. Both sides experience growing pains, but the difference lies in whether you're growing from pressure or growing with protection. So the financial and lifestyle gap between living alone in a resource-rich versus resource-limited environment and what exactly that entails. So on the tough terrain, rent often consumes 40 to 50% of your income. Again, if you grew up on the tough terrain, rent often consumes 40 to 50% of your income. Just think about that for a quick second. And on the tough terrain, limited access to safe neighborhoods, affordable groceries, or reliable landlords just because of the environment itself. And adulting is constant problem solving. You got car trouble, job instability, no margin for emergencies. And I can relate to the factors I just mentioned when it comes to this aspect of living on your own, because in 2020, I moved into the place that I'm at currently towards the end of 2020 during the COVID times, and we all have stories from that. Whether they're good or bad is dependent on you, obviously. And at that time, being fully transparent with you guys here, I quit my job because I was there for 2 years, and it was just eating up like inside in my soul, my everyday being, and I just didn't want to be there. But because of the instability that I was used to growing up with from being on my own for 2 years up until that point, I was thinking, well, suck it up and keep pushing through, because you need the income from this job to pay your rent and pay your bills and all the other things that you need to survive on this earth. But in that moment, it was just leaving the job was the best thing that I ever did. And luckily, I was able to collect some unemployment, which helped out gratefully. But I was unemployed for 6 months, and all the money that I had saved went directly to moving into this place. So it was starting back at square one. And I share that story because, easier said than done, obviously, and we're all trying our best to live our lives and survive. But sometimes you just have to take chances and take risks and live with the result of that. And on the Affluent Acres side, rent may be offset by parental help or trust funds in some cases, safer communities as well, and much more reliable infrastructure. And the independence that you get from growing up with a suburban background is a strategic step, not a sink or swim scenario like how most people with a urban type of background usually experience when living on their own for the first time. And this is from National Low Income Housing Coalition in 2024. A full-time worker must earn $32.11 per hour, roughly $61,000 a year, to afford a one-bedroom at a fair market rent in the U.S., which is impossible for most entry-level earners. So for some of my audience listening to this episode or watching it, thinking, $60K, I'm already making like more than that, I'm good. But for the average person, it's very hard to even get close to that. And obviously it depends, because $60,000 in a state like Alabama goes a lot further than making $60,000 in New Jersey trying to find a one-bedroom rental to be at. And independence looks the same on Instagram, right? A key, a lease, a new couch. But off screen, the cost of keeping that freedom hits very differently. And the emotional and cultural growth that comes from solitude, regardless of class. So in this section, I'm going to just try to bridge the gap with both sides here for takeaways and just what can be done to improve and have both situations meet in the middle, right? So let's start with the tough terrain takeaways. So the tough terrain takeaways: resilience, adaptability, community-driven problem solving. Affluent Acres takeaways: self-awareness, patience, and value of structure. And both sides combined learn self-reliance and identity formation through solo living. And no matter where you start, whether you start from nothing and work your way up, or whether you already have a common ground or have everything and end up being on your own, highlights the shared humanity that no matter where you start, independence tests your emotional infrastructure. And this is from a 2025 University of Michigan study. Solitude increases creativity and self-efficacy when chosen, not forced. And whether you left out of necessity or out of readiness, both sides are learning how to turn four walls into a foundation. This is just another reminder that, of course, based off of your socioeconomic background, you either have advantages or disadvantages to help you grow and get better, or just to have a better life in general. Whether it means, one side having to struggle and sacrifice more, and the other one having it seen as more self-made and easier path to go down. But regardless, living on your own is a big deal, and it's part of growing up and life in general. So whether you've moved out of your parents' home in your 20s, 30s, or even later, we all, at the end of the day, are trying our best to make do with what we got and just survive, especially with how things are currently at and where they're headed in this country. And that's not political. I'm speaking in general. So in this episode, we summarize independence through the lens of privilege and pressure. So the question that I pose for the audience today is, when you think about living alone, what does it mean for you? Survival or freedom? And if you've been blessed with stability, how can you extend that support to someone who never had it? Again, when you think about living alone, what does it mean for you? Survival or freedom? And if you've been blessed with stability, how can you extend that support to someone who never had it? Thank you guys for tuning into today's episode. And if you like this episode, please be sure to continue showing us love on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and leave a comment, rating, review, so we can continue growing the Middle of the Fence family. And please be sure to check us out on YouTube as well at Andre Spruell, and you will find the full-length episodes as well as clips and reels from the different episodes. And again, no matter which side of the fence you grew up on, we're all more alike than we think. My name is Andre Spruell. Catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And if you like this episode, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube, and hit the little notification bell so you could be the first to be notified when the latest episode drops. Also, be sure to check us out on your favorite podcast streaming platform as well, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And again, no matter what side of the fence you grew up on, we're all more alike than we think.